good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, or evening. I shouldn't assume. Welcome to Sky Notes. Today, we're going to talk about what if you don't have a birth time, right, Lillian? And
Yeah,
then what's our other topic we're talking
we're
about?
going to talk about Mars ingress into Scorpio.
So all the good astrology stuff today.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did so good at having our guests lined up and realized, oh crap, our last September episode, we don't have a theme. So I visited Google actually, and what if you don't have a birth time is one of the most asked questions. So
Mhm.
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Um, now there's many ways that you can deal with not having a birth time, and there's tons of information you can get from a chart without knowing an exact time.
hmm
But how do you explain if you have a client or a friend who doesn't have a birth time? How do you explain what they're going to lose?
Oh,
It with
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, how do you
I
go about that?
go right to generational impact. I go to the outer planets. I explain that they share this with their generation. And then I tighten up and go into aspects that they have that would be impactful, regardless of the house they're in. That's what I would frame it as. And then I would say we've got 4 minutes to get an accurate ascendant that would give you how people see you when you show up, how your chart is aligned to give you support for public events or private, and where the obstacles are. So it's pretty different. Generational impact in some aspects. How about you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if somebody comes to me and they're not sure about whether they need to have a birth time or not, I'm more of a psychological astrologer anyways, and so
Mhm.
that is more about how the planets are interacting with each other.
Right.
And so really the moon is the tricky bit in the
Mm.
equation because it does move fast enough. And I have had situations where I actually had a client who her birth time, she wasn't sure when in the morning it was, and then the phase changed in the
Mm.
time that she gave me, and it was
Yeah.
actually a talk about phase, so that was a bit tricky.
Yeah.
And I even had somebody whose sun sign we couldn't determine
Yeah.
because of the it switched right about the time that she said it was.
Yeah.
And so but we were still able to look at all the other planets, and this is the thing that's funny with people, when we talk about sun sign stuff, right? Whether they feel like their sun or they don't feel like their sun, or sometimes the cusp story,
Mhm.
people feel that way, that the cusp is a thing, like they feel like both signs,
Yep.
right? But the Mercury and Venus don't get far from the sun. So
Right.
often, you're going to have planets in the sign that the sun is in. So with in this particular situation, she had all the energy of both sun signs. So again,
Mhm.
it still didn't matter because we could have a cohesive conversation around the rest of the stuff in her chart. Although I don't know that I'll ever have another client where I knew their moon sign for sure, but not their sun sign.
That's
That
wild.
was pretty unique. Yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
I do recall several conversations with folks. Rectification isn't my specialty. I'm encouraged to see folks tackling it. I was in a OPA organization for professional astrologers mentorship program, and we got to go through Wendy Stacy's process for rectification, and she does it for every client, if I'm not mistaken. And I recall getting readings from Rob Hand, and he would ask, I want sort of impactful dates from your life, and as specifically as possible, can you share when those happened? And he asked for like 10 of them or something like that. And so I assume there's some of that comparison going on before he hits the client. But I love talking to a client and saying, here's Taurus, Aries energy. Let's get into like where this falls for you, because it's
Right.
not a bad description of how we move from planet to, or sign to sign and impact to impact.
Yeah,
So,
right, right. Well, and I mean, where you do lose out is the predictive piece because the chart itself, the wheel, that's the world
mhm.
around you. And
Yeah,
so you can't determine which area of life. The more precise your birth time is, the more precise the predictive work is.
exactly.
And we can look at the chart and know which area of life is going to be impacted and so on. You lose that with birth time,
Yeah,
with birth time. There are, you know, you can still use if somebody has a roundabout birth time, you can still use perfections. Like there are
right.
techniques you can use, but
Mhm.
the really detailed predictive work is you lose that when you don't have a precise time of birth. But
Right.
you know, one of the things that I realized through mistake, you know, learning through mistake is that um, you can easily get the wrong information from a client. I actually
Yeah,
had a fellow astrologer who won a reading, a short reading,
yeah,
gave me the wrong data. Yeah,
right.
so I mean, it can happen,
But
right?
at any point, I mean, it's why we repeat the birth data back in a client session
Yeah,
to
yeah, and
nip
but
it in the bud.
yeah, but what I learned in that situation was that there was still, and it's happened where I've put it in wrong. Like I've had it happen a few times. The program, like Solar Fire, didn't have daylight savings for a year, a
Ah,
particular year. So
right?
there's things that can happen, right?
Yes.
And so there, but it didn't hurt the session. Like it shocked me in the times, like it's happened maybe 4 times in 10 years. Um,
Mhm,
but there are things that came up in the consultation that would have
mhm.
never come up if we would have had
Right.
the right birth time.
Well, I love that oracular notion, if I can kinda expand on that a bit. There was one
Yeah.
time, Moll Frothingham, great, astrologer, she and I went to a local band, in Seattle, and at the at the location, we had brought, for our purposes, the charts of Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, other folks, you know, who were notable, some Seattle folks, because we happened to be in Seattle, and some random charts from Astrolab. And we were astrologers who were working the oracular angle, and we had folks pick out a chart, and then we would walk through those transits. And there's something about the practice of astrology where you're understanding the, I'm not going to say alchemical, I'm going to straight up say chemical reaction between two things. And sometimes it's H2O and you get water, and sometimes it's hydrogen and oxygen, and you get explosions and devastation. And so I wonder about that oracular component in our readings, and it doesn't do anything to take away the hours of practice and, you know, getting kind of, you know, sharing your work with other astrologers so that you make sure the quality is really good and attending to ethics and all that kind of stuff. But the oracular component's nothing to sneeze at, especially when we have a very wild ass set of transits.
It's true, it's true, and I found, on that vein, I will douse, like, if I'm trying to nail it down,
Ah,
I'll use some. I'm not a specialist at rectification at all,
mhm.
and for those who don't know what rectification is, it's basically working backwards, taking events from your life, and
Yeah.
then using predictive techniques to see the probability of when that might have happened, what, you know, which time creates a chart that most supports the events you've already gone through.
Yes.
And so people who do this regularly are sorry, distracted. I have walking over my head and I wasn't
Oh,
expecting it. Anyways, so people who do this, like you can eyeball it really fast if you're
right.
doing it all the time. And I know a few astrologers, Melanie, she lives up here in Canada. She teaches rectification and she does rectification on every single chart that she works
Yeah.
with. for sure. And the programs will have it too. I haven't dove into Nechepso yet. That's the newest.
Right. We should have
Yeah.
them on. I'd love to hear about that program.
And there's a lot of AI and stuff in that, and I feel
Mhm.
like it's gonna do a lot of that work, and
Yeah.
Sirius has some rectification pieces built in, so you
Uh-huh.
can, like, plug events to it, and it'll give you scores and stuff,
Oh,
and
cool.
that's usually what I do is I start there if we're not
Yeah.
sure about a time, and then I get a narrow, and
Yeah.
then I douse, and
Yeah.
I go at it from the point of view that whatever time we come up with, there's a really important story that we're supposed to talk about.
Absolutely.
So it
Absolutely.
does get divinatory in a
I
way, right?
I think it's worth it to bring it up, you know?
Yeah, for
I don't
sure.
wanna be hiding the magic of the work that we do. It's enough that we practice, and y'all, we do the math. It's in there. It's in there, and with the way things are, we always have to go back to the beginning where we have to write it down. I mean, we're talking about programs, and programs are great, but I've taken lessons on writing down charts and working with logarithms, and that reminds me what I wanted to share about the validity of the data for the birth chart. We're not just looking for what time you were born, we're looking for where you were born, because it makes a significant difference if you were born in Iceland or if you were born in Florida. Um, and let's see, what do we have? Date, of course, we're going to need that. Yeah.
I did
So,
I did a whole session with somebody who put in the place that she was living in at the time, and I
right.
confirmed twice that, "Okay, so this is your birth data." She, "Oh, yep, 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 yep." Did an entire reading, and then when she got the chart, emailed me and was like, I wasn't born there. So does that matter?" But you know what was really interesting was that when I went back through the session, s intuitively, I didn't go to the places that it impacted apparently, which is so
Exactly.
strange, right? It's so interesting how that can happen.
Exactly, and I wonder about that because that other divinatory piece of it, I think, or oracular piece is some people aren't ready to hear about stuff, or even go so far as to say, if you're not confident about your bedside manner and the relevance of what you're sharing, you can't go into all kinds of stuff. It would be poor practice. But I was wondering with the where you are in space and how relevant that is, right? Because we are another sort of luminary or a focus point when we're doing the chart. I was wondering how far that went, north, south, east, west, and I don't have an answer for it, but I know that 4 minutes is the ascendant and that you can get really close to the moon changing. And so there are places, like you say, on the cusp where you're pointing out more of an active cycle, but there are plenty where it's pretty solid. And like you're saying, you can share your sun is this, your moon is this, and here are the choices of ascendants that you're looking at. When I first studied astrology, I thought I had a Libra ascendant. I have a Scorpio ascendant. However, in Vedic astrology, I have a Libra ascendant. So, to your point, there may even be competing stories that are trying to surface
Right.
that are coming through different modalities.
And it's worth it, like, I need to revisit this, but there's entire books and courses about learning how people look based on their
Yes.
chart and their ascendant.
Yeah.
And so that's another tool that can be used. So I have somebody close to me who has 0 fire in their chart,
Mhm.
0. And when I ran everything through the Sirius program to get potential times, we narrowed it down to 2 possible, and one gave Aries rising, and
Oof,
they're a ginger. And I'm like, "Oh, there's
I love
that."
it.
I mean, that
Yeah.
and then it lined up in so many other ways, but,
Oh,
it's like it actually was the hair color that
yeah.
was like, yeah, that is very likely the time of birth for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
there
So
are ways.
interesting. Yeah, there are ways. And
Yeah.
then, the if I mean, I suppose my advice to somebody who's interested in astrology and doesn't have their birth data, first, I heard via one of the astrology groups on Facebook that quite often the state has in the United States, forgive me, the time at which people are born, so that even if you get a birth certificate and it doesn't have the time on it, you can send in another request and hit other and say, I need the time. And I didn't know that was possible. My mother's birth certificate doesn't have the time on it, but I'm going to give it a try. And that was 1931. So if that, reveals something, I'll be really excited about that. But that's one piece. It's like, have you looked for your data, right?
Right.
And then the second piece is, are you interested enough to go spelunking into astrology yourself? Because you're kind of cracking open your own world. If you have this range of opportunities, you're the best one to kind of delineate those.
Right.
And so I would almost recommend studying.
Can I back up a little?
Yeah.
So in Canada, if you need to find your birth chart,
Perfect. Perfect.
so it's not that different. I mean, I knew, because a lot of my instructors have been American, I knew about the States and that's why so many celebrities' data is so easy to
Available.
get.
Yeah.
And actually, if you go through celebrities' charts, you can almost tell where they're born based on whether the birth time is there or not. Like all the Canadian celebrities, it's a crapshoot if you're going to get a birth time, because our birth certificates don't have a time.
Okay.
And that information is not valued here at all.
Right.
And like Will Morris, who's from the States that's living in Canada now, complains a lot about birth times in Canada because they're not reliable at all. But which is why I had to get a little bit good at rectification, because
Right.
the chances that the right time is written down are
it's
sketchy.
always good to have breadcrumbs to the next modality that will help you out, right?
Yeah,
So it's always good. Yeah.
Yeah. But you can go to a registry in Canada and order your long form birth certificate.
Huh.
So I know that they don't always have them. Like Ontario hides, like to get anything after the age of 29 in the province of Ontario is very difficult. They hide the
Wow.
records. I've read stories about people going after birth data and it taking years and costing thousands of dollars just to get them to move on it. So anyways, you never know. But even like I've had the best clues. Somebody said, all of my uncles swear that I was born right after the first period of blah, blah, blah hockey game.
I love that.
Right. And so there are, we just finished breakfast. So, I mean, that kind of information, don't discount that if you're talking to an astrologer and they're wondering about your time of birth. Those clues in themselves are super helpful because we can, then we're at least knowing, okay, are we evening? Are we morning? Is it night?
Right.
And that is super helpful too. So ask your family. I mean, it can be a pretty fantastic self-discovery journey if you like your family. I'm not going to assume you do, because
it's super fun, but I would advise folks ask those questions earlier rather than later, because as a woman who's approaching 59, none of my older siblings remember the joy of my birth, and I can't get them to tell me anything else about it because too much has happened.
Yeah.
The
other thing, is this true? Baptism records can also have them.
My father's baptism record had it, and I had it from, he was in an orphanage, and I called the orphanage back in the 80s when I lived in San Francisco, and they sent me his baptismal certificate, which was a different date and the time. And then in one of the rituals to release us from bad karma, that material went missing, and I thought for sure I delivered it back to my family because, he's not just my dad. But anyway, it gave a 10-day different time and a 9/19 birth time, a 10-day different date and a different birth time as well. And I didn't know what to do with it because the whole enchilada was so bizarre,
That is bizarre.
And, adoptions, all of the, secret family, all of that kind of stuff, it makes it really difficult. And one of the things that I've been really hopeful and have seen, good stuff come out of is all of the folks who are finding each other through 23andMe, who are siblings, or, there are different relationships, and maybe their parents couldn't handle that or didn't want that as part of their persona. But now they can make the choice to be with their siblings. And if they didn't have them before, they can find out how much fun they are now. You know what I mean? I love siblings. I really do. I form sibling relationships with folks my age all the time. And I always think like, oh my God, isn't that brave of us to be willing to be jerks and stick around with each other? Isn't that quite the thing, to model our behavior after the least flexible foundation that you can muster? But it is part of the joy of it, right? And it helps me enjoy my what do you call them again? My blood relatives. I can really sink my teeth into them, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. I had a friend who I happened to be at her house on her birthday. Was it on? I don't remember if it was the day before or on, but all of a sudden the phone rang. She
Okay.
picked it up and she said, "Yeah, Mom. Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Thanks for doing that. Okay, bye." Her mom, every year on her birthday, called her as soon as labor began and called her every hour until delivery happened. I'm like, do you, like in hindsight, I'm like, the value of that,
Yeah.
for that reason alone, have a Virgo mom, because
Yes.
was a Virgo.
Oh my word. I love that.
And I'm like, so even because there's stuff that can be done looking at like birth time, right? Like the beginning of birth,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
even when she'd conceived. I'm like, oh my gosh, the gold mine of astrological information.
I
That
never
all
heard
of
about
that is.
that until I moved to the West Coast of the United States. And then people were telling me they had the t-shirt from the night they were conceived. And I'd be like, oh God, have some decorum. Have you ever seen a Katharine Hepburn film? Go look at it. No mention of dirty clothes whatsoever. Just kidding. But to that point, it reminds me about A.T. Mann's work, where he puts the conception in the ninth house, and then it blazes a trail through the 10th, 11th, and 12th, and then you're born at the ascendant, and then it carries on. And I haven't reached out to him. I really want to understand more about it, and I know he has teachings and books, etc. I have his book, but I want to understand more about that, because wow, that really changes the whole story.
I read something recently on social media. Somebody said something about, oh, they deemed the IC the birth canal.
Woof.
And I'm like, that doesn't feel right to me, because of the roots and the
Yes.
connection to the family
Yes.
and all that. To me, that
Yes.
is the moment of conception.
Oh, I love that. I
And
love
then
that.
we get 9 months, right? And then we
Yeah.
get, so to
Okay.
me, the 12th house
Yummy.
is the birthing until you're
That's
out.
A.T. Mann too, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
and that
it's intuitive, right? Because you want to be
yeah.
seen. And then to your point, you're not saying it, but to say it, we want a foundation. And we don't want to confuse a foundation with when we meet up with other people. It is private, ours, not really accessible generally, except for your family. So, I mean, that's my sense of the IC.
Well, and just like the hiddenness of the
Yeah.
act of conceiving, which it
Oh,
makes more sense at the very bottom of the chart.
yeah.
Whereas in many birth cases, there's an announcement, like there's a thing, right? So, I mean, to me, you can only argue that that happens at the 7th, the 10th, or the 1st. That
Right.
is not a
Well,
fourth thing.
I wish I knew. Yeah, not a fourth, but I love the ninth. Call me crazy. Call me a Sagittarius. Call me moon in the ninth house. But when he said ninth, to me, that resonated. I was like, that's me. I'm conception. Just kidding. But but I love all of the movement, right? Like it precedes the ascendant, right? it's working its way through what will be the public houses, but aren't now, except for the mom, right? She becomes more and more visibly with child, potentially. Yeah, I think that kind of stuff is fascinating. And then there's also the folks who track eclipses, right? For folks who are born on eclipses, but also the pre-birth, whatever
Yeah, the
the eclipse pre
prenatal solar
that's,
eclipse
that's it.
is the one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Lots of
pre-birth could be
predictive stuff in
anything.
there.
You.
Yeah.
Yeah, you. I think we're getting close to our Mars stuff because I just said you and pre-birth. You. But we can hold off. I want to finish this. So if you want the cleanest data that all astrologers are ready to have, it is your birth time up to 4 minutes. That data may be available. There are many workarounds. We want to know where you were born. We can tell you about what happens to you in your current location, but we want the foundation, where you were born, and then, of course, the date, if you've got that.
Yes, and it's going to be different from country to country, province to province of where you live. France apparently great birth data,
Okay.
So it really is there's a cultural piece to it, which is there are Asian countries where they don't even
Indian
know what day
countries.
they're born,
Oh, wow.
or even what year, because I've had stories where, not in as an astrologer, but as a hairstylist,
Yes.
I worked with people who, when they came over, were young children,
Yeah.
and the parents would lie, right? Actually, often
Course.
when they're teenagers, because they needed to be children,
Yeah.
right? They needed
Yeah.
to be under the age of 13.
Yeah.
So they don't even really know their birth year in some cases. So, I
And
mean, there is a really cultural piece to this. You have
that will
India as one of the seats of astrology, so their data is going to be excellent.
got it.
So, I'm assuming. Tell me if I'm wrong,
Well,
please.
no,
If
I think
you
you're
have been
right.
told I'm
I
wrong.
also think of China as really strong, focused on astrology. I think of India as focused on astrology because because it's commonly used in the culture to define where you're going. But yeah, I think it varies. And to your point, there's so much disruption, climate disruption, war, et cetera. We're going to continue to meet folks who, even if they have the data, they don't have it anymore. And that
Right.
doesn't leave you with no options. There's plenty of options.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then I mean, the farther away from actually being able to tell when somebody's born is, then we can move into the divination piece of it.
Yeah.
And so find yourself an astrologer who actually works in that way, because not everybody is gonna,
That's right.
right? Yeah.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways,
That
well,
was
that
fun.
was fun. So now we're going to talk
Yeah.
about Mars and Scorpio. And I thought of this, like, I'm noticing the more we have to pay attention as astrologers. And I think it started when we talked to Andrea
Okay.
Gers
Yep.
and the remediation piece,
Yeah.
and really starting to, because talking about how things are really cyclical from a health perspective and from
Right.
a mental health perspective.
Right.
And kind of a big thing that I felt and noticed, and I cannot say enough about how different life feels with my progressed sun in Scorpio. Like I'm relearning a different way to be.
And
It's
that's a once in a
interesting.
30-year
Yeah.
transition, right? Or
Yeah.
progression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not everybody's actually going to get to have their sun in, the
Ace.
sign that's too far away from your own sun sign, because it
Yeah.
takes a whole year to go a degree with that technique, right? But Mars, when I'm in a Mars year, so let's
Yeah.
keep that in mind. Like it's a very strong Mars year. So when Mars was with the moon was in Cancer, that's the first time I've ever noticed the ebbs and flows of the moon with Mars,
Mhm.
and the way that, and like watching people's moodiness, and it was wild and a very
Yeah.
different experience. Because I mean, Mars goes through a sign in a year and a half, so
Right.
we've felt this lots of times, right? But
Yes.
it's going to be different based on how you're changing.
Yeah.
But we haven't had Mars in a sign it likes to be in
Mhm.
since last spring when it was in Aries.
Right.
And that has been very obvious. And the
Yeah.
thing that I noticed this week was
Mhm.
the difference in social media. It's
Mm.
almost like a switch got turned off when Mars went into Scorpio.
Mm.
And that it was, to me, tell me what you think. It was
Mhm.
obvious it was the Mars switch because we had big things this week that nobody talked about, like
Yes.
the rapture
Oh
that
my
was
god.
supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Like, if
It
Mars would
it
have still
came
I
out
s
of
I'm gonna
nowhere.
say, if
Yeah.
Mars was still in Libra,
Yeah.
that would have been, like,
Yeah.
the
Well,
biggest thing.
let's take a step back. So personally, Mars is one of your engines, right? Your source of vitality. In EA, the way I was taught, it's there to respond to your Venus, which is your desires that you will get in a healthy or unhealthy way. So you really want to steer them towards the healthy way. And then Venus hands it off to Mars. Mars and goes and gets what it is that you need. But on this wider level, it's typically associated with agitation or anger or volatility or extra energy. I've talked about it before where my husband goes on bike rides, to have emotional digestion happen. Well, he went on something of the order of a 6-hour bike ride and came home sacked. And then Mars went into Scorpio. And then he slowly put himself back together. And now I feel like he's going to have more sensitivity around how to direct that energy. So it's on a broad scale, kind of irritating. With the moon, it often is related to moodiness.
But, like, I don't for
Yeah,
you, tell me
correct any
if
of that.
you
Yeah.
if you felt a shift.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
My shift was nothing happened for 2 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so one of the things that we talked about in prep was, we wanted to touch on when we talk about ingresses, we downplay, I think, or ignore, I'm not sure, the real shift from one sign to a next. And like most of them are quite dramatic.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
actually think about what the signs represent and also what's creating them. So are they,
Yes.
we went from cardinal to fixed with Mars, right?
Exactly.
Which is
Yeah.
very different.
Yeah.
And so to me, there are one ingresses that I'm more sensitive to, but that I
Yeah.
realize is based on my chart. But this particular shift, so Mars in Scorpio is now fixed, and
Yes.
Mars in Scorpio is one of the most tenacious Marses
Exactly.
there is.
Exactly.
And so one of the benefits of this, and I think why I'm enjoying it so much, is that if you are prone to
Hmm.
ADHD type tendencies, um, to have Mars focused is so helpful, or can be so helpful in getting stuff done. And so, like, if I can give you a small piece of advice at this point in time, the thing that you really need the attention and the focus to get done that you've been dying to get done, use Mars. It's there until November 4th. Use it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Use it.
And as you mentioned Andrea before, as she says, it's a shift as easy as go do something. Just go do something. Mars wants expression of energy. There's a whole series of things that can happen when you move into expressing energy. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, for sure. For
And then
sure.
the ADHD note, it's funny, and I hope I don't think I'm telling tales out of school, but we've been decluttering like crazy and making our house just yummy, 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 and extra yummy. And we got done early yesterday putting the kitchen to rights. And I think I've mentioned it before, so sorry if I keep mentioning it. It's gnat season down here in the South, and so we're like, sanitizer in the sink so they don't grow out of that. And so it's kind of a lot, right? And usually after a lot, we are like, how do you feel? Satisfied? You feel satisfied? Because I love that concept. And I do think you need to ask kids, especially, but for me, I'm going to make an exception. What satisfies you? Can you tell when you're satisfied? All of that kind of noise. And so instead, long story short, my husband developed another project. And then I heard him doing that pre-ADHD diagnosis stuff of like I walked out, I had been kind of chilling out in the bedroom, and I walked out to see where he was because the house is so yummy. He can sit anywhere, and it delights me to see that. And he, without even looking at me, goes, "I would like a seltzer." And this is not my husband typically. And it just made me laugh because yes, that tenacity is back, right? And so it's got an edge to it, a little bit of like, we don't even want to FAFO. He got his seltzer. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And then
yeah.
I just went and did my own thing. And he came back and he went, "I don't know what that was all about," and showed me
Right,
some kitten video or something.
right, right,
But
right.
like that edge is important, and we want to work the edge. We want to have an edge. It's okay, but we don't want to hurt people. We want to work it. We want to do stuff with it. And so, not necessarily sitting in front of a computer. Go take a walk, go hang out with an animal, drive somewhere.
Yeah, what's really interesting though about the on the computer thing is that I've been trying to work on some of my business assets, my website,
Yeah.
things like that, right? And almost immediately with that shift, I was trying to get to the bottom of the problem. Like, and it
Wow.
was instinctual. I didn't go there on purpose.
Yeah.
But that's such a scorpionic energy to want to get to the root of the problem and figure out what's causing get down, dig the dirt up.
That's
I
so
mean,
much fun. I love that you describe that because it makes me feel like you can use that energy because you're going to be in a container. It's fixed.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you can find out what you like and don't like about the container you get in when it's fixed and iterate, make
right,
changes.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to qualify why I feel like there was a social media dip. I mean, to me, the air signs are the most attracted to communicating,
Yes.
period, but online.
Yeah.
And so and there was just so much rage
There was. I
leading
mean, it
up to
was
the
building,
shift.
building, 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 building.
And Mars and Libra, its tendency, if we just like literally take the themes literally, Mars is aggression
Right.
and Libra likes passivity. And if you put those two things together, the tendency of Mars and Libra is passive aggressive.
Ah, yes.
And of course, because of the Venus Libra charm, there's
Yes.
more of like a tendency to maybe manipulate your way into what you
Whoops.
need. I'm
Whoops.
trying to be gentle about it
You're
because
being
I
good.
know
You're doing just fine.
and it's effective for sure.
Yeah.
But it's different. It's a very different energy. And you can see it in the snark when people are online. Like if you want to watch Mars, watch the internet with especially
Yes.
topics that create fights, because that's going to have a
Right.
Martian piece, right? So
Yeah.
if to me, the day that the rapture was supposed to happen,
Mhm.
there was an opportunity for whoever to, go crazy with that and
Oh,
really
yeah.
talk about how it didn't happen. But it was crickets. It was
Yeah.
crickets. And
Yeah.
even the stuff that happened with the UN, it had
Yeah.
a little bit of traction, and then Mars moved into Scorpio and it just died. And there was so much opportunity there. So to me, it was really obvious that it was a Mars shift.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and even with the eclipse, to me, it felt like it should have been a lot more everything should have been more dramatic.
Yeah.
And it wasn't dramatic in the sense of news
Right.
and being
No,
made into
but
something, right?
there was definitely a push, and there still is, it is a great tragedy to see the, judicial, arm just absolutely cave, and the changes they're making are permanent. They could be suddenly quite dangerous for anyone who's not explicitly a MAGA, or even somebody who is explicitly a MAGA, because they are going after their own. Just they're not starting there. They would like to start everywhere else. But the point there being, there was so much like terror. And to your point, I think Libra is the best at, but all of the air signs are quite good at. I see all of us but it doesn't have weight. It's the air. And it's good for reporting. It's good for what's going on. It's good for accuracy in that regard. But often, if it's got one little tweak of water, it comes into, I see all of us and I'm going to take care of you. I don't need to know what details you think are valid for taking care of you. I've got it. Aren't you lucky? And so that kind of adds to that insanity, but it requires that no emotion, right? The neutral countenance. So that can't happen with Mars and Scorpio. I think that Sam has described it as you wear your heart on your sleeve, right? Or, I mean, I don't want to conflate planets and signs. He was talking about the sun sign. But yeah, I think that there's too much, there really is genuinely too much at stake, and talking's not going to help necessarily when we hit water. And so that's the part, even though it's ruled by itself, it's not passive aggressive, but it is kind of waking somebody up from a slumber and they start hissing at you or something like that. You know what I mean? It's not manipulative, but it is present.
Right. And in its own sign, there's a certain amount of authority Mars feels in that sign.
Absolutely.
And then if we want to look at the Pluto as the modern ruler, it's also in a fixed sign right now.
Right.
So, right, like, so that energy is very anchored no matter which way you look at it, and really, I don't know what the first word is that pops into your head for Mars and Scorpio, but revenge is always my very first.
Right.
It
goes between sex and violence, right? So it's either a concubine who poisons someone, calling someone a prostitute, you know what I mean? Like that exterior vibe, right? Like misunderstanding the proper devotion to women's sexuality by a mile kind of thing. But it is secret also, right? And that's crazy, right? Like I've heard it described as mysterious. It could also be withholding. And again, I think that's because we're in cultures right now that by and large do not want to deal with emotional processing with each other and don't really have it. And I think that's part of maturation. You know what I mean? Part of becoming a grown-up is finishing your grudges and you're finishing your resentments, and kind of like, I can say genuinely, I get irritated by a lot, but it is all based on stuff that happened to me so long ago that I don't think about other people as agents, coming at me. That doesn't make any sense to me, and nor do I partake in that. But to your point, I think we talked about this in prep. Curses have popped up in my head. I'll be meditating and I'm like, I would like blah, 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 blah. And then I'll feel like the energy kind of vibrate. And I'm like, okay, look at that. Look how available that is. Yeah. I bind and rebuke you. I'm not that person. That is not acceptable. And so there is like I
had somebody reach out and ask about, Mars and Scorpio, and should she drive more carefully? And I thought, well, that's interesting, because I mean, we think about the movement of Mars, so I get how she got there. But my thought when she asked that was, yes, but I would be more worried about making somebody mad and then them following you home to a dark place. You know what I mean? Like there's
absolutely,
that
absolutely. Yeah, there is the darkness that can happen. Yeah, absolutely. So crime, misunderstandings that lead to weird, like enmeshment,
obsession, all that kind of weird.
And don't you feel, I mean, I'm going out on a limb here, but I kind of feel like that's a desire to be deeply connected. And so it's, when I think about the healthy part of Scorpio, it's this ridiculous intimacy, that's just, I mean, what a blessing, there's nothing like being seen by somebody else and accepted even the worst parts of you. Like, I think my husband and I, as an anecdote, had an argument early on where I was being an asshole, and it was pissing me off that I was being an asshole. So I kind of like sat down and like was quiet for a minute. And he said something like, and I might get this wrong, but he said, what goes on when that's happening to you? And I was like, well, this is what goes on and this is what goes on. And he goes, is this like who you are underneath? And I went, no, I'm fighting it as much as you are. And it kind of set the tone. You know what I mean? That he could test and trust that I wasn't looking to refine being more of a jerk or more of an asshole. I was looking for somebody who could hold me accountable without getting stuck in it. And God bless Aries rising, because he was like, he's always like, fuck off with that. What are you doing? You know, you can't lay your weird Cancer shit on me. I'm not doing that. And I love it because I don't want it either. You know, I don't want that. So there's this thing that happens when you don't have subtext, right? Like when there is no passive aggressive for years and years and years, there's nothing but intimacy, and you either do or do not want to do it. There's not like, oh, if I don't do it, it will affect all of this subterranean blah, blah, blah. No, you've attended to the subterranean blah, blah, blah. You know, and that is enough work for everybody for the rest of all of our lives, my opinion. But it creates this like buoyancy, maybe because I'm a Sag, but it creates this sense of like, you're never going to walk on eggshells. There aren't eggshells. And to me, that's the healthiest of Scorpio, is that tenacity being used to like say, you've been kind of a jerk. I'm so in love with you. How do we kind of figure out to accept all of this stuff? You know, another way to put it is Gottman, the relationship therapist, who, after testing for years and years his efficacy, found a 95% accuracy rate as to whether or not couples would stay together. And then his wife swooped in and said that data has no meaning unless you can help people stay in relationships if they have these signatures. Are you seriously going to just condemn people to not being in relationships? And he's, oh, good point. And they say when you meet your partner, you know what you like and don't like about them. And so it's more a matter of, are you going to bang them on the head because they like video games? You know, are you going to take issue with everything that you don't like? Or is the 60% that you love, you know, enough to kind of create table stakes where you still get to be who you are, even though your partner is different?
I love it.
Yeah.
I always, if I don't have personal planets in a sign, or I like Mars and Scorpio is an energy that's pretty foreign to me and my chart.
Yes.
So what I like to do is just like from an empathic point of view, is I just imagine, like, when I think of Scorpio, it's the deepest point of the ocean, like a stillness that we really, unless you've been there, can't truly imagine.
Ooh, I love that.
Dark, still, and then Mars, which wants to move. So if you put yourself in the darkest place in the ocean, and then but you still have to move forward, how do you navigate that?
Yes.
You have to be tenacious, and you
Yes.
have to be like picky about the way that you do it, and
Yes.
you have to be you have to keep going because you're down there. You need to, exactly.
Life
And
and
there's
death.
a lot of pressure, and and so it's a gift to us if we're going to use it in a way that's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It is not great. Wait, I'm going to back up. Mars and Scorpio can be extremely useful. The issue is that we don't actually know what's going on underneath.
Right. We'll find out when we get there. Yeah.
Right. And so for each individual person, this is going to be different, because it's going to be like, where is Scorpio in your chart? So where is, Mars moving? So for me, when it was going over, like when it was in Libra, it was going over like my Mercury, my Uranus, you know what I mean? So I was extra, that transit to me is always extra
Yep.
in the
Yep.
busy and the overthinking and the actually having a hard time getting
Yes.
things done, right?
Mm.
And so that's part of learning your own cycles and understanding how it works.
Yes.
Um, but it moves into my eighth and my ninth and into my ninth house. So there is it's different. And the kind of the dangerous is the word that I'm coming up with, but I don't want to make this sound
Like a
scary or
chemical
anything.
thing, like a face peel. Just
Yeah, but I mean, what I'm thinking about is that like that whole like underhanded revengey kind of stuff.
volatile, maybe. Volatile
Yeah,
might
is
be.
there's different parts of the chart where that is going to be more significant for you, right?
Yeah,
And so knowing that can be helpful if
right.
you need to be paying attention to um, if somebody's going to come after you for something or you're going to step on the wrong toe at the wrong time and
Interesting. So I
right.
know somebody with Mars, Mars in the Mars and Scorpio in the fifth. So they're going to be cruising up to a return, but they also might be attracting the wrong attention, is kind of what you're saying could be
Maybe.
a thing.
But I
Yeah.
think about the enemy houses, right? The 12th and the
Mhm.
7th. One
Yeah.
is hidden, one is not hidden,
Right.
right?
Right.
So if Scorpio, if there's and I actually part of Scorpio does start in my 7th house
Right.
of enemies. So
My husband has it there. Yeah.
yeah, so just being aware that this is not the time to go on social media and say all the things you've been wanting to say
Right. Right.
because, you're just
I'll
putting
do
yourself in a
that
situation that's
for
not.
everyone because I have it on the first. And you will be prying social media out of my warm, chubby hands um, because I'll gladly move on the second that we're done with it.
But whenever I think about, like, really intense Scorpio energy, I always think about the guy who started the CIA
Oh yeah,
because he had,
always
like
confident, often wrong. That's their motto.
so he had Scorpio on the midheaven and the 11th,
Oh yes,
and
yes.
the reason why it even crossed my knowledge was that, he had Palace in Scorpio, so it was part of a Palace talk that I did.
My goodness.
Yeah, well, but and he had I can't remember everything else that's up there, but it's wild that
Yeah.
he started a secret organization to literally stalk people,
Wow.
which
So
is like you can't get more Scorpio on the 11th house than that.
I don't want to be Pollyanna about Scorpio because it's a real world out there and real things happen. To your point about secrecy, I remember I mean, I know I talk too much about my life, but sorry, guys, it's our show and not yours. But when I was a kid, and I, thought I was a terrible kid because, if you did certain things, then you were that. And so I went ahead and assigned myself that. And then found out at 16, like that wasn't true at all. And that I had kind of been messed with and then come out into the world. What the heck was I talking about? Why am I doing this? Oh, so yeah. Part of that was my parents got divorced and we became privy to all of this knowledge of what were things my dad had done that, I didn't know about. And that has continued for the rest of my life. Like, I'm sure before I die, I'll hear one or two more things that are shocking, weird, violent for no reason that my dad was a big part of. And so that I think, plus I got no privacy as a kid. And I think that often happens. People aren't necessarily good with that. It created this like perversion of secrecy where it's always the CIA and it's always, whatever you can awfulize constantly, it's that. And the reality is much simpler. Like when I think about the eighth house or Scorpio, I think that's somebody who's burdened with an inventory of their relative stuff, whether it's metaphorical or real, and they have to like get that stuff somewhere else. So I'm not thinking about sex and power and all of that complicated stuff. I think, oh my God, the administrivia must be making you insane. The safety, the volatility, the yum of it, that is what we want, what we yearn for, is clean and sexy and easy. And, it's not full of all of the perversion. So I'm not sure, like I've heard this too about Virgo, that like, I know Virgo controls the digestive system, right? But like, there's something about that process of Scorpio that we're not getting to yet. You know what I mean? It's getting stuck on something cultural. And then to your description, I love what you said about the bottom of the ocean, but if you can forgive me, I'll take it somewhere else. I love those adventure things where people are really skilled at something and they go do it. And yesterday I watched a helicopter hook and rescue mission on what looked like the Camelback Mountains, but it could have been anywhere, Sierra Mountains, anywhere in the world. They seemed to be US folks. But the angle that we had was the limited speech they used to get a helicopter to a person clinging to a steep ravine at the top of a mountain where they had gotten stuck and had been there for hours. And I looked at them and I could see how tight their calf muscles were. And this is kind of the way that like I have accepted that processes work. If you want to be saved from a disaster, you have got to stay calm. And it really helps if you know what you're doing. And there's no room for talking. It's the only place where you can't. They were saying 1 forward, stop, 1 forward, stop, down. And then they were sending a hookup back to the helicopter. And then they brought a bag down to put that person in and another for their bag. And then all 3 of them went up on this hook. Like in my mind, it is unknowable the kinds of obstacles you face. And it is in every moment that you're counting on the expertise of the people around you. Maybe you aren't, right? Like that guy who was saving the person, who was a woman, he was patting her, in these really intimate ways, but she was so in shock that you could see that it was like, you're not dead. You're not at the bottom of the mountain. This is still hard. We're not done, but you're going to get home. And I think that kind of story is the story that Mars and Scorpio wants. That Aries wants the challenge, but it wants to win. And Scorpio will bring in life and death. But it's to get to this other place, not to just sit there in crisis, or not to freeze it and not to blow it up.
Right. And one of the things that came to me while you were talking, just in trying to leave something with people about how to work with this energy, is that like anytime Mars is fixed, especially in a sign it likes to be in, and when we say it likes to be in a sign, it means it operates better there. So, some of the really great things to do are things that you want to develop and keep doing.
I love that.
Because the fixed always gives you that tenacity to keep going. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we can get really literal and say exercise program, because Mars and movement, right?
Yep.
But this is the thing that came to me while you were talking, because of the nature of Scorpio and that deep psychological draw, whatever you choose to do is likely going to kick up whatever you've been trying to bury in that Scorpio
Really
emotion.
good point.
Yeah. And that's just something that, because even in my own, like, dealing with the issue that I've been dealing with, like the mistakes that I've made, my mental loop of going through the mistakes that I've made and trying to counsel myself and tell,
I get
has
it.
been
I
really
get it.
obvious. So
I
that's
get
been
it.
kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. I love that. Yeah, because you shouldn't be afraid of that, because it's not a sign of failure. The things that are habits or familiar, you have often said, will attract you for the fact that they're familiar. And so it's natural when you're moving away from the familiar for it to feel more uncomfortable than you can handle. And it is really okay. Like the other piece I felt about that, and I loved everything you said, so I'm going to shut up in a minute, because I want you to talk to it. I want to hear more, and we don't have a lot of time left, is acknowledge that you want preparation. The fixed signs accommodate that. So if you're stopped in a process because you haven't made notes before you did the process, go make the notes. If you want to envision your final thing, I was sharing recently, I think next week I get to go get checked, post-cancer checkup with the surgeon. And every time I think about surgery, I think about the little cartoons I draw for myself of like happy going in, happy in the room if I have to stay, flowers, happy coming home, animals saying hi to me. And I just draw it all the time because I'm trying to make sure I know where I'm going, and that the stuff that comes up that's uncomfortable, it can come up. I'm not trying to be like little princess in a pea. The life can happen. I enjoy that, but it'll give me context so that I'm like, I'm still going to go this way.
Definitely. Yes. It definitely, I am not saying don't pick a thing to do, because it's okay. This is the thing that's interesting to me about Scorpio, is that I think it often gets a bad rap because of what it brings up in the non-Scorpios, the stuff that it draws from people, right? Whether it's their own reactions or it's their own history or whatever, right? But it is valuable. I know when the progressed moon is going through Scorpio for people, it's like every book you read is like, go to therapy. This is the most beneficial time you'll ever have if you go to therapy now. So we're all going to go through a little bit of Mars therapy, whether we want to or not.
Yeah.
But, if there is something that you have been like telling yourself, I want to do it, I want to get this going, I want this to be something that lasts, use the Mars and Scorpio energy, man. And it'll grow when Mars goes into Sagittarius and Jupiter's in charge. So how the cycle works, man. And then it goes into Capricorn, Mars does, and it loves being there too. So we've got some good Mars stuff going on for the next while for getting stuff done and moving ourselves forward and, fighting the good fight, as they say.
I love it. Getting traction. Yay.
Excellent.
Well, this was great. We could just keep talking.
Yeah, we could. That's the problem. We could keep talking forever. So thank you to the people who stayed around and watched. And thanks everybody who watches once it's up permanently. And we will see you next week. And we don't know what we're talking about next week either. So we will keep you posted. Thank you, Lillian.
Thank you, Tracy.